A storm raged outside, but one window defied it, hiding a secret no one expected. Welcome to Crimson Whisper. I'm your host, Bramwell. Tell me where you're listening from. I love hearing your voices in this community. Your comments make this journey unforgettable. Now let's begin. It was on a night when London seemed determined to wash itself into the Thames that I first heard of the singular affair of the window that would not be rained upon. A gale out of the east drove the rain in files across Baker Street, rattling our windows and sending sullen eddies of smoke down our chimney, so that Mrs. Hudson was at her wits' end between the draught and the fire. Holmes, indifferent to the elements as to most earthly inconveniences, lay stretched upon the settee with his long fingers steepled and his eyes half closed, as if the tempest without were but an orchestration for his private meditations. The bell clanged with an insistence that bespoke neither politeness nor leisure. A moment later, there was a flurry in the passage, and Inspector Lestrade, with his coat shining like black oilcloth and his hat streaming upon the mat, was shown into our sitting room. "Mr. Holmes," said he, breathing hard, "if you've a mind for a riddle, there's one in Queen Anne Street that makes no sense to a Christian man." Holmes's eyelids lifted a fraction. "You are wet, Lestrade?" "Naturally," the inspector retorted, shaking himself like a spaniel. "London is a colander tonight. But it's not the rain that bothers me. It's where it did not fall." "Ah!" Holmes's eyes kindled. "Pray proceed. A death at Sir Felix Hartwell's, industrialist and philanthropist. You've seen his name in the papers. Found an hour past in his study, alone, the door upon the bolt within, the key in the lock, the hearth fire low. The servants, hearing a crash, forced entry by a side door. Sir Felix was on the carpet by the writing table, his face dark and swollen. The French window, which gives upon a small walled garden, has its lower pane fractured, the catch broken, an appearance of entry, you might say. There are footprints on the garden path up to the window from the mews gate. Lord, what a mess of them! Yet no marks upon the carpet by the window. And this is the part I bring to you. The window itself, inside and out, is as dry as though St. Swithin had held his hand there." Holmes sat up with the sudden alacrity that denotes, to those who know him, the stir of his hunting blood. "As dry, you say?" "As a sermon," said Lestrade. "And the rain has been hammering at every other pane in the house, like a barrister at a jury. The sill beneath this window is bone dry. The curtains, too. I laid my hand to them. Dry as dust." Curious. Holmes rose, thrust his feet into his boots with two brisk stamps, and reached for his coat. "Watson, your hat. We shall examine a miracle." Within 15 minutes, our cab deposited us at the tall, sober facade of No. 37 Queen Anne Street. The lamps burned low against the sucking gloom, and the gutters were coursing swift black streams that swallowed the reflections of the gaslight as a snake takes eggs. A uniformed constable stood beneath the portico, steam rising from his cape, and led us swiftly within. The hall had that quiet richness which money gives when guided by taste rather than ostentation. A clock ticked, solemn and measured, somewhere in the house. Yet even in that well-kept stillness there was the unmistakable disturbance of death, a sense, intangible but real, that the air had been offended. Sir Felix Hartwell's study lay at the back, a noble room with bookcases to the ceiling, the glow of a coal fire upon the brass fender, and a broad writing table set with a shaded lamp, blotter, pens, and a heavy silver inkwell in the form of a crouching lion. The French window occupied the centre of the far wall, its panes showing the dull black press of the garden beyond, and at intervals the pale sheet of rain as it swept past the glass. Sir Felix himself lay with his shoulders turned upon the Turkey carpet and his hand clenched at his waistcoat. The face was suffused. A thin purplish groove ran clear about his neck, as though a cord had for a moment impressed the flesh and then been removed. His other hand, extended, still touched the corner of the writing table, where a sheaf of papers had slid half off, their edges crimped by the fall. Holmes, having bowed briefly to the corpse as to an opponent worthy of his steel, turned at once to the window. "You observe, Mr. Holmes," cried Lestrade, eager to display his anomaly. He drew back the left-hand curtain. The damask fell with a soft hiss beneath his fingers, undeniably dry. He lifted the sill, ran his palm along it, and held out his hand. There was no moisture upon it. Holmes did not answer. He leaned so close that his aquiline nose nearly kissed the glass, and passed his gaze inch by inch across the pane, not as a man looks at a window, but as he would scan the skin of an adder. He then stooped to the broken segment at the lower left. A jagged fragment remained in the frame. Several more lay on the carpet just within. "Lestrade," said he, "how many persons have trodden this room since the alarm?" "Myself, the butler, the footman, and the family physician, Dr. Travers, no more." The servants had sense enough to hold the rest back. Commendable. Holmes dropped to his knees. "Watson, your eye, if you please." He indicated with a long forefinger the inside margin of the sash where the catch had been broken. A faint smear, irregular and dull, lay along the painted wood. "It is not water," said I, bending. "Nor is it dust. Give it your nose," suggested he. There was a faint odour, mineral, not altogether pleasant, like that which clings to a ship's lantern newly trimmed. "Oil," I ventured. "Not lamp, precisely. Fair cleaner spirit." Holmes's lids hooded. "Paraffin or something kin to it. We shall let our later tests pronounce. Observe also that it has been applied in strokes from the centre outward. See the feathering. And that there is a like trace upon the glass itself. The window, it seems, has been anointed." "Anointed," Lestrade snorted. "And what of it? Only that rain is a democratic visitor, and knocks at every door alike, unless, of course, it finds the latch too slippery to hold." He ran his finger lightly along the pane, and brought it away with the faintest suggestion of sheen. "The hydrophobic film, my dear Inspector. Water beads upon it and slides away, leaving no kiss behind. Hence your dryness." He let the curtain fall and moved to the garden door, which communicated by a short passage to the mews. We followed him with a lantern, for the night there was thick and urgent. The little flagged terrace beneath the French window was as awash as a quay. Beyond it, a narrow gravel path ran between box hedges to a postern gate. In the lantern's circle, I could see a confusion of boot marks impressed in the gravel's softened crust, some small, some broad, some overlapped. "Careful of your feet," Holmes murmured, and then crouched, lantern close. "Here, a light tread with a narrow heel, female, I should suppose, not long ago, for the water still pools in the deeper toe. And there, a man with a square-built shoe, resoling present, marks left and right. But note, Watson, the edges of the impressions, the crumble is inward on these, outward on those. The former were made while the surface was still firm. The latter after it had become pulp." Lestrade peered. "What is the use of such nicety? All London passed this way by the look of it." "Not London, Lestrade. Only those whose business lay in this garden," Holmes returned, his voice quiet. "And business there has been in two waves, the earlier to arrange an appearance, the later to attend its revelation." He straightened and, with a swift gesture that was half impatience and half delight, tapped the lantern's hood. "Let us go in. I have seen all that I need from the rain." Back in the study, he stood for a moment in the centre of the room, his head tilted, eyes roving the ceiling, the hearth, the table. He touched the brass fender. A dark smudge transferred to his finger. He examined the coal. The upper layer was dead and clinkered, but beneath, where the grate's heart should have been, there was a small, bright kernel, like an eye that refuses to close. He put his hand to the bell cord. A single golden thread remained caught upon one of its tassels. He laid it carefully upon the blotter. On the table lay Sir Felix's silver watch, its chain coiled like a sleeping serpent. Holmes snapped open the case. "Stopped at 20 minutes to 10, he observed. "And the house clock?" "10:30 when we arrived," said Lestrade. "The physician says death about that time, give or take." Holmes said nothing to this. Instead, he stepped to the writing lamp and raised its shade. The wick had been snipped too cleanly for a clumsy hand. There were 2 shallow crescents of char on the snuffer, as though it had been trimmed twice in short succession. He glanced at the sheaf of papers half spilled to the carpet and slid the topmost sheet back into the pool of lamplight. The page itself was blank, but the blotter beneath, the heavy lion-backed one, showed faint ghostly ridges. "Have you any pencils?" he asked. Lestrade produced one. Holmes shaded the blotter lightly. As he did so, lines came up, pale at first and then more certain, a column of figures. A short sentence beneath, no more than a fragment, and then a blot where the hand had paused. "Wind refuses," Holmes read softly. And then, with a flicker of amusement in his eye, "Oh, the storm." "Good Lord," cried Lestrade. "He wrote of the window?" "Oh, someone wished us to believe as much," said Holmes. He let the pencil fall and for a moment stood with his long hands upon the table's edge, head bowed, the hawk profile sharp against the lamplight. When he raised his face, there was about his mouth that thin, cold line which I had learned to associate with the scent of his quarry. "Inspector," said he, "you have brought me a death in a locked room, a garden that bears too many feet, and a window which, by artifice, has learned to keep its face dry in a deluge. Add to that a watch that chooses to die before its owner, a fire that will not quite, and a thread that chooses to linger where threads are not accustomed to be. I congratulate you. We shall before dawn either make fools of ourselves or of someone else." He turned to me with a glint of mischief. "Come, Watson. The storm beats at every pane in London, save one. It is time we asked why this window refused the storm." Holmes had not the air of one overwhelmed by mysteries, but rather that of a hound who scents quarry in the brush. He stood still for a long moment, his fingers steepled, his gaze sweeping the chamber, and I knew better than to disturb him. Lestrade, however, fidgeted by the hearth, his boots squeaking faintly upon the carpet, until at last Holmes's low voice broke the silence. "The window is not our puzzle, Lestrade. It is the riddle's mask. Whoever contrived this scene counted upon our wonder at the dryness, and indeed upon your immediate report of it to me. The thing was staged, not discovered." "Staged," Lestrade barked. "But the man is dead, Holmes. You don't mean he—" "I mean nothing yet," Holmes cut him off. He knelt by the corpse again, drawing from his pocket a small magnifier. With it he examined the thin line at the throat, tilting the head so that the lamplight grazed the skin. "Yes, the impression is unmistakable. Narrow cord quickly applied and quickly withdrawn. Death by strangulation. The mark is too sharp for accident and too shallow for suicide. Then murder clear as day," said Lestrade triumphantly. Holmes's brow contracted. "Not clear, Inspector. Never clear until the fog is lifted. Consider, the door locked from within, the key still in place, yet a murder accomplished and the assailant vanished. Add to it the broken window which proclaims entrance, yet by its very dryness refutes it. If a killer fled, how did he pass? If he entered, why no trace within? We must ask ourselves not only who killed Sir Felix, but why he wished us to believe it occurred in a manner so patently impossible." The inspector muttered something about devilish cleverness, but Holmes was already moving, swift and noiseless as a shadow. He examined the scattered papers, lifting one or two, then replacing them with precision. From beneath the sheaf, he drew a small object, an ivory paper knife with a blade so sharp it might have served in a surgeon's kit. He held it up, sniffed delicately, then laid it aside with a thoughtful expression. "Watson," he said, "your notebook. Record. Trace of oil or chemical residue upon sill and pane. Watch stopped 20 minutes to 10. Bell cord bearing foreign fibre. Coal partially replenished. Lamp over-trimmed. Ivory knife scented faintly of tobacco, not ink. Each item a piece upon the board. Together they spell, well, let us not name it prematurely." I jotted down his words, though in truth their significance was as mist to me. Holmes then addressed Lestrade with sudden briskness. "You said the servants first heard a crash?" "Yes, somewhere about 10:15. They supposed it the window pane breaking, but the butler found the door bolted. That is when they fetched me, and no one has touched the Mews gate since. Locked fast when I came. A constable stationed there now. Excellent, keep it so. Now the household, who resides here besides the deceased?" "His wife, Lady Hartwell, and a niece, Miss Eleanor, I believe. Both upstairs under care of a maid. They are much distraught. Distraught, yet not insensible, I trust. Watson, you will accompany me. Lestrade, kindly remain here and ensure nothing is disarranged. The smallest fibre may be of weight." We ascended a broad staircase muffled in thick carpet, our steps hushed in the gloom. At the first landing, a maid, pale and trembling, awaited us. She led us to a drawing-room, where Lady Hartwell reclined upon a chaise, her face hidden in her hands. Beside her stood a young woman of perhaps 20 years, upright, pale as marble, her dark eyes fixed not upon the floor, but upon us, and most particularly upon Holmes. Lady Hartwell lifted her head as we entered. "Is it true? Felix dead?" Her voice broke upon the word. Holmes bowed with unusual gentleness. "It is true, madam. I grieve to bring you certainty. Yet your aid is vital if justice is to be served. Tell me, what was Sir Felix's health of late?" "He was strong as ever," she whispered, No illness, no complaint. Only his work weighed upon him. There were meetings with men I did not know, letters he would not show me. He was preoccupied and secretive, Holmes murmured. And this evening? He dined early. At 9 he withdrew to his study, saying he had accounts to settle. I retired not long after. Then came the cries and the dreadful news. Holmes turned to the niece, whose gaze had never wavered. Miss Eleanor, you were near? I was in my chamber, Mr. Holmes. I heard nothing until the commotion. My uncle was a stern man, but not unkind. Yet he had enemies. Of that I am sure. Holmes inclined his head. Enemies, an industrialist of wealth and power rarely lacks them. Did he speak of threats or of disputes lately grown heated? She hesitated, and in the pause I thought I saw a flicker of something cross her face, fear perhaps or defiance. I know little of his business affairs, she said at last, too calmly, only that some pressed him for ventures he would not join. Foreign men with foreign names. That is all I know. Holmes studied her a moment longer, then bowed again. Your candor is appreciated. Rest now. We shall trouble you no more. Back in the corridor he leaned close to me. Watson, note that the widow is crushed, yet the niece is composed, too composed perhaps. And her speech rehearsed, if I mistake not. She knows more than she will tell. We descended once more to the study. Lestrade greeted us impatiently. Well, Holmes, what do you make of it? Holmes only smiled thinly. That the storm is not confined to the weather, Inspector. It beats also upon this house, and if we listen closely, we may hear which window it truly enters. He bent again over the corpse, and his hands moved deftly, examining pockets, cuffs, and chain. From the inner waistcoat, he drew a folded slip of paper, sealed with wax. Breaking it open, he read in silence, then passed it to me. The paper bore but a single line, in a bold, unfamiliar hand. When the storm comes, the window shall not betray me. Holmes's eyes gleamed like flint in the lamplight. A threat or a promise? Watson, the game deepens. Holmes held the slip of paper delicately between thumb and forefinger, as though it were a butterfly's wing that might crumble at the least disturbance. His gaze remained fixed upon it for several moments, but his mind was clearly ranging far beyond the study walls. I have seen that look upon him often enough to know he was already constructing the hidden framework of the case, though he would reveal but fragments of it to us in due time. Lestrade, however, could never brook silence where words might intrude. What's this, then? A madman's scribble? Or some business code? It means nothing to me, Holmes. Precisely why it interests me, Holmes replied. He slipped the note into his pocket. The author had no expectation it would be understood by the casual eye. But consider, Lestrade, the symmetry. A window that is dry amidst storm, and a message that promises precisely such defiance of nature. Coincidence is a lazy refuge, and I have little patience for it. He moved once more to the desk and examined the lion-shaped inkwell. With a penknife he lifted the lid and sniffed. Curious, ink here is of an inferior make, not what a man of Hartwell's means would employ. And look, Watson, stains upon the underside of the lid, as though it were handled by a clumsy or hurried hand. Sir Felix was methodical. Such untidiness ill suits him. I nodded, though the subtleties escaped me, and I confess my gaze strayed often to the still figure upon the carpet. The line at the throat, an accusing mark against the darkness. Holmes straightened suddenly. Lestrade, what of Sir Felix's correspondence? Surely a man in his position maintains letters, memoranda, agreements. Locked drawer in the desk, Lestrade answered. The butler gave me the key, but I have yet to examine them. Then let us do so now before the trail grows cold. The inspector produced the key and turned the lock. Inside the drawer were neat bundles of letters tied with twine, ledgers with gilt edges, and a stout envelope sealed with black wax. Holmes pounced upon the last and broke it open without hesitation. Inside were 3 folded sheets, closely written in a foreign hand. He studied them by the lamplight, his brows drawing together. German, he murmured. The script is businesslike, but the tone, here, our agents grow restless. Payment must be secured. And this, the formula will not remain hidden forever. A matter of chemistry, Watson, you see, and a dangerous one. Sir Felix had in his possession a secret worth coveting. A formula, I repeat it, for what I cannot yet say, but enough to breed enmity and bring murder stalking through this house. Holmes folded the sheets and replaced them carefully. Lestrade, you must guard these well. They are the hinge upon which this case may turn. The inspector grunted, clearly displeased at being cast in the role of custodian rather than master of events, but he complied. Holmes's attention shifted again to the French window. He paced toward it, his long shadow thrown across the carpet, and knelt where the broken pane gaped. He passed a hand across the sill, then leaned outward into the wet garden. The rain slicked his hair, but he paid it no heed. Suddenly he darted his hand beneath the outer frame and withdrew it swiftly, holding up what appeared to be a narrow length of wire, bent at one end into a crude hook. Aha! Here is the finger that unlocked the riddle. See how the hook is greased, the metal scored by use. It was slid through the broken pane to draw back the catch. But why, I ask? Should one trouble to break a window only to produce the appearance of intrusion, when in truth the killer was already within? Already within! I exclaimed. Holmes's eyes glittered. The broken pane is a stage prop, Watson. The dryness, the oil film, the footprints, all devices meant to distract us with a picture of external assault. But the true hand came from the heart of the house. At that moment there was a discreet knock, and the butler entered with an apology. "Begging your pardon, gentlemen, but Lady Hartwell entreats Inspector Lestrade. She is greatly overcome and prays for word of the inquiry." Lestrade, glad perhaps to remove himself from Holmes's darting questions, departed with the servant. The door had scarcely closed when Holmes turned to me in a low, urgent voice. "Watson, observe what has unfolded. The widow is struck down with grief, genuine beyond counterfeit. The niece, calm, composed, evasive. And here these German letters hinting at foreign designs. Now add to it the paper with its ominous sentence, a watch that lies about time and a fire unnaturally tended. Do you not perceive, my dear fellow, the skein that begins to form?" I admitted I did not, save that the affair grew darker with every breath. Holmes gave a dry chuckle. "Patience! The pattern is there, though not yet complete. We must probe the household further. Come." He moved again to the fireplace and this time stooped to examine the ashes more minutely. With the poker, he teased apart a half-consumed scrap of parchment. Gently he lifted it free, crumbling but legible in part. A chemical equation, symbols scrawled hastily, though charred at the edges. Holmes's eyes flashed with triumph. "Here, Watson." Sir Felix was indeed guarding a formula, a scientific discovery, and one his enemies coveted. He sought to destroy it, yet too late. This fragment proves it. He folded it tenderly and placed it in his pocketbook. Footsteps announced Lestrade's return. His expression was strained. "The lady is near collapse, Holmes." But the niece, she stood by calm as ice. "I mistrust her." "As do I," Holmes said softly. "But mistrust is not proof. Proof lies in detail, and detail we shall have. Inspector, keep the house secure. None must leave until I have concluded my work. Watson and I shall examine the servants next. Often the eyes of those below stairs see more than the masters suppose." The inspector nodded grudgingly, and Holmes beckoned me toward the door. As we stepped into the dim hall, the storm still howling beyond the panes, he whispered so only I could hear, "Mark me, Watson. The window refused the storm, but it will not refuse the truth. Before dawn we shall know why Sir Felix died, and who found the Tempest a fitting cloak for murder." Holmes led the way down the corridor with a stride that bespoke urgency, though his eyes remained keen and roving, taking note of every picture, rug, and piece of furniture, as though they too might bear silent testimony. The household was hushed, the storm outside providing a relentless percussion against the roof. We reached the servants' quarters at the far end of the house, where a narrow passage opened into a warm, plainly furnished room. There, gathered in uneasy silence, were the butler, a footman, and the maid who had earlier guided us upstairs. All three rose at our entrance, their faces pale and anxious in the lamplight. Holmes's manner shifted at once. His tone grew courteous, almost reassuring, though his questions cut with the sharpness of a blade. "You have served Sir Felix long?" he asked the butler, whose silver hair lent him an air of gravitas. 18 years, sir," the man replied with a slight bow. "I was in his employ before he came to this house. Then you knew his habits well. Tell me, was he given to working late as tonight?" "Frequently, sir. He was a man of industry, seldom idle. Did he admit visitors to his study in the evenings?" The butler hesitated. "On occasion. Of late there were gentlemen whose names I did not know. They came after dark, sometimes by the garden gate. My master bade me bring them wine and leave them." Holmes's eyes glimmered. And tonight? Did any such visitor call? None, sir. After dinner he dismissed us. I did not see him again until we forced the door. The man's voice quavered, though whether from grief or fear I could not determine. Holmes turned to the footman, a stocky fellow with wide eyes. You were among those who entered the study? Yes, sir. I was with Mr. Granger, the butler here, when we heard the crash. We ran at once. The door was fastened. It took us some minutes to force it. And when you entered, what did you observe? The man swallowed. Sir Felix upon the floor, sir, his face dreadful to see. The window was already broken. The garden beyond looked black as a pit. That is all. Holmes studied him keenly, then addressed the maid. You are Miss Eleanor's attendant? Yes, sir, she answered timidly. You heard nothing unusual before the alarm? Nothing, sir. Only, she faltered, only what? Holmes prompted gently. Only that Miss Eleanor had gone down not long before, saying she wished to speak with her uncle. She returned a little after, pale and silent. Then the commotion began. I started, but Holmes merely inclined his head. Your candor is commendable. You will not suffer for it. Remain here, all of you, until I have further questions. He motioned me toward the door and we withdrew. The instant we were alone in the passage, Holmes gripped my arm. You heard, Watson? The niece went to him shortly before his death. She told us nothing of this. That silence alone convicts her of knowledge, though not yet of guilt. But surely, Holmes, I whispered, if she had confronted him and departed, she might be innocent of the fatal act. Grief and fear could account for her reticence. Holmes smiled faintly. Your heart, my dear fellow, is more charitable than my reason. Yet you are correct. We must not leap to conclusions. Still, a concealed visit is a thread worth pulling. We returned to the study where Lestrade awaited us. His face brightened at our approach. Well, Holmes, have the servants given up their secrets? They have given us a morsel at least, Holmes replied. He glanced toward the clock upon the mantel, which now pointed to midnight. It grows late, but this case allows no slumber. Inspector, summon Miss Eleanor here. We must press her further. We must press her further. We must. Lestrade complied, and a few minutes later the young lady entered. She carried herself with composure, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as they fell upon Holmes. Miss Eleanor, he began in that soft, deliberate tone which I knew to be more formidable than any bluster. You told us earlier that you were in your chamber when your uncle withdrew to his study. Yet your maid states otherwise. She says you went down to speak with him shortly before his death. Why did you withhold this? The girl's cheeks colored, but she lifted her chin proudly. Because I feared it would cast suspicion upon me. Yes, I went to him. I wished to plead on behalf of a friend, someone in difficulties. My uncle was harsh, unyielding. He dismissed me angrily. I returned to my room. That is all. And the note we found upon his desk? The words, when the storm comes, the window shall not betray me. Do they hold any meaning for you? Her eyes flickered, but she answered steadily. None, Mr. Holmes, I swear it. Holmes regarded her in silence for several moments, then turned away abruptly. That will suffice for now. You may go. When she had departed, Lestrade gave a snort. There you have it. She admits being with him at the crucial hour. It's plain as day, Holmes. The niece did it. Holmes shook his head. Plainness deceives, Inspector. She may yet prove innocent, though her silence was ill-judged. No, there is another hand here, one that labors in shadow. Did you note, Watson, the defiance in her bearing? Not guilt but pride. She conceals something, yes, but whether it is murder we shall see. He paced the room, restless as a caged hawk. Then he halted suddenly before the writing table, his gaze fixed upon the blotter, where faint ridges still lingered from earlier shading. He took up the pencil once more and passed it lightly across a fresh corner. This time a different line emerged, half obscured by overlap. Tuesday at the window. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Tuesday, 2 days hence. A rendezvous, no doubt. And at the window? Our miracle pain is not yet done with us. Inspector, we must contrive to be here on that night, for it is there the true hand will show itself. Lestrade gaped. You mean to set a watch? Precisely. But until then we must not alarm the quarry. Keep the household close, but offer no hint of suspicion. Let them believe themselves secure, and the storm will beat again upon the same glass. As we departed the chamber, Holmes pressed my arm once more. Watson, the next act of this drama is written already. We need only attend the performance. Mark my words. The case of the window that refused the storm will open its shutters wide come Tuesday. The days that followed were laden with an oppressive tension, as though the very walls of Queen Anne Street were conscious of the role they played in some dark intrigue. Holmes had persuaded Lestrade to treat the case with a delicate hand. No arrests, no public scandal, merely a discreet cordon about the house and a quiet watch over its occupants. Lady Hartwell remained prostrate with grief, her chamber attended by physicians and maids, while Miss Eleanor moved about with that same icy composure, betraying neither nervousness nor remorse. Holmes spent much of the intervening time at Baker Street, silent and withdrawn, his mind working in that peculiar fashion which seemed to outsiders mere idleness, but which I knew to be the crucible of his genius. On the Monday evening he spoke at last. "Watson, have your revolver ready. We go to Queen Anne Street tomorrow night and you will require it. You believe the murderer will strike again?" I asked. Holmes gave a thin smile. "Not strike, Watson. Show. There is a performance arranged, a rendezvous noted, and the stage is already prepared. Our task is to occupy the best seats in the theatre." Tuesday came, bleak and sodden. The storm of that fatal night had passed, but its ghost lingered in the dripping streets and a heavy curtain of cloud that smothered the gas lamps. Holmes and I dined early, and at 9 o'clock we were once more at Sir Felix's house. Lestrade met us at the door, looking weary but eager. "You've had me sit on my hands these 2 days, Holmes," he muttered. "I hope your play is worth the candle." "You shall see," Holmes replied, his eyes glittering. "Place your men at the garden gate in the far corner of the street. No one must pass unobserved. As for us, Watson and I shall keep to the study. Extinguish all but the faintest light, and leave the French window unlatched as I direct. The rest will follow." The arrangements made, we withdrew to the study. The corpse had long since been removed, yet the room bore still the atmosphere of its grim secret. The broken pane crudely mended with a temporary board, the heavy curtains drawn and the scent of charred coal lingering in the hearth. Holmes extinguished the lamp, leaving only a single candle flickering upon the mantel. Its dim glow painted the room with deep shadows, so that the French window, with its dull gleam of night beyond, loomed like a spectral portal. Holmes took up his station in the corner nearest the door, his figure blending into the darkness. I crouched beside the desk, revolver ready, my heart hammering louder than I would have wished. The house had fallen utterly silent. Only the occasional creak of a timber or the distant drip of water disturbed the stillness. Time stretched unbearably. At last, from the garden outside, there came the faintest crunch of gravel. Holmes's hand lifted in the gloom, commanding silence. I held my breath. Another sound followed, the subtle scrape of metal against glass, then a soft click. Slowly, carefully, the lower catch of the French window yielded, and the pane creaked open. A shadow slipped inside. The figure was cloaked, the hood drawn low. In the dim light, I glimpsed a hand gloved in dark leather, carrying some object wrapped in cloth. The intruder moved swiftly to the writing table, laid the bundle down and began unwrapping it. Holmes's whisper reached me, low and fierce. "Steady, Watson." "Not yet." The cloth fell aside and there gleamed a small vial, half filled with a clear viscous liquid. The figure produced a slip of paper and began to scrawl rapidly, glancing from time to time at the vial as though to ensure its safety. Suddenly Holmes struck a match. The flame leapt and the intruder started back with a gasp. In the sudden glow we saw the face revealed beneath the hood, Miss Eleanor Hartwell. Lestrade burst through the door at Holmes's signal, his men close behind. The girl stood rigid, the vial trembling in her grasp, her eyes blazing with something fiercer than fear. "Drop it, miss," Lestrade barked. Holmes, however, raised a hand to stay him. "No, Inspector. Let her speak. She has come to finish the work that death left incomplete." Her composure wavered then, and she looked from one to another of us. At last she spoke, her voice low but steady. "Yes, it is true. My uncle guarded a discovery that should never have been his. That formula was my father's work, his life's devotion. When he died abroad, Sir Felix seized it, claimed it as his own, and left us destitute. I swore it should not prosper him." She held up the vial. "This is all that remains. I came to reclaim it, to destroy what he sought to profit from. I had no hand in his death, I swear it." Lestrade moved as if to seize her, but Holmes stepped forward swiftly, plucking the vial from her grasp with a dexterous hand. He examined it, sniffed cautiously, then corked it tight. "A potent mixture," he murmured. "Yes, Watson, here lies the heart of the matter. But her tale does not yet account for the strangling cord, the false trail, nor the note. Miss Hartwell may speak truth in part, but another shadow walks beside her words." The girl's eyes filled with sudden tears. "I did not kill him. I wished only to claim what was rightfully ours. When I left him that night, he was alive. If he was murdered, then it was another who struck the blow." Holmes regarded her gravely. "So I believe. Yet your silence, your secrecy, nearly damned you. Inspector, you will place this young lady under gentle restraint, but treat her as one not yet condemned, for the true hand of murder still lies hidden. And rest assured, it will show itself before this night is through." As she was led away, the stormless sky pressed heavy upon the window. Holmes remained by the table, the vial glinting in his fingers, his face set like stone. At last he spoke. "Watson, the net tightens. Tonight has given us proof of motive, but not yet of guilt. The murderer lurks still within reach, and he will not rest while this formula exists. We must be ready, for the play is not yet ended." Holmes stood motionless for some moments after Eleanor had been removed, his long fingers clasped behind his back, the vial gleaming faintly in his hand. The single candle threw his features into sharp relief, and I could see the deep furrows of concentration etched upon his brow. Lestrade, restless as ever, shifted from foot to foot. "Well, Holmes," the inspector muttered, "we've the motive plain enough. She admits she sought the formula, admits she confronted him. Do you ask me? That's quite sufficient. A jury would need no more. A jury would need no more." Holmes wheeled round upon him, his eyes flashing. "Our jury, Inspector, requires truth, not convenience. Miss Hartwell has told us her purpose was to destroy, not to profit. Her silence damned her, yet her actions tonight have exonerated her of the strangler's cord. Do you suppose a young lady of refinement, however wronged, would contrive such elaborate artifices? The oiled glass, the contrived footprints, the broken pane? No, Lestrade. Another hand fashioned those deceptions. Eleanor's guilt is of concealment only." The inspector scowled but made no reply. Holmes set the vial carefully upon the mantel and turned his attention once more to the writing table. He examined the blotter, the ink, the scattered papers with renewed energy, as though the events of the evening had quickened his mind to a final surge. Suddenly he uttered a soft exclamation and drew from beneath the blotter a tiny shred of fabric, dark, coarse, and stained faintly with oil. "Watson, your glass," he commanded. I handed him my magnifier, and he bent low. "Guess canvas weave, not of fine garment, but of workman's attire. And see here the smear of paraffin, the same that coated the window. Our murderer is not of this household's drawing rooms, but of its trades. We must look below stairs to those whose hands are accustomed to oil and wire." At that moment, a commotion arose in the hall, the sound of hurried footsteps and a cry. The door burst open, and one of Lestrade's constables stumbled in, pale and breathless. "Inspector, there's been an attempt at the Mews gate. Someone tried to force it. When challenged, the fellow bolted into the garden. We lost him in the dark." Holmes sprang to the window and flung it wide. The garden lay shrouded, its gravel paths slick with mist, the hedges looming like black walls. No movement stirred. He turned back, his face alight with grim satisfaction. "The fox grows restless. He will not wait while the trap closes. Inspector, double your watch at the gate. No one enters, no one leaves. Our quarry prowls within." We spent the next hour in tense vigil. Holmes moved ceaselessly about the room, testing the locks, studying the ashes in the hearth, even lifting the carpet edge to peer at the boards beneath. At last he paused by the bell cord once more, plucking at its tassel. His fingers caught another fibre, a coarse thread of hemp, and his expression hardened. "Watson," he said quietly, "this is no random murder. Sir Felix was strangled with a cord of hemp, the kind used in bales and shipping. Coupled with the fabric we found, it speaks of men accustomed to dock or warehouse. And recall the German letters, demanding payment, urging haste. Sir Felix was entangled with agents of industry, perhaps espionage. It was they who sought his formula. Eleanor's intrusion complicated their design, but she is no killer. Lestrade, though unconvinced, could not gainsay the evidence. Then where is this dockman of yours, Holmes? We've searched the servants and all are accounted for. Accounted for yet not absolved, Holmes replied. One among them has played a double part. Consider. The butler hears a crash, raises the alarm, yet admits strangers were admitted by the garden gate. The footman helped force the door, yet his boots bore fresh gravel. One of them has erred. He drew his coat about him. Watson, we must test the servants again, at once. We descended together, Lestrade at our heels, to the servants' hall where the butler, footman, and maid awaited under guard. Holmes's gaze swept them like a searchlight. He stepped first to the butler. Mr. Granger, you served your master faithfully 18 years. Tell me, what wage does such fidelity command? The old man drew himself up. More than money, sir. I had his trust. Just so, Holmes murmured and passed him by. He stopped before the footman, who shifted uneasily. And you, your boots, if you please. The man flushed. What of them? Holmes knelt and examined them closely. The soles bore a distinctive repair, half leather, half rubber, crudely nailed. I recalled the very imprint Holmes had pointed out in the garden mud that first night. He rose slowly, his voice cold. You are careless, my man. You should have changed your shoes before treading the gravel. The footman blanched, his lips working soundlessly. Lestrade stepped forward with a growl, but Holmes lifted a hand. Wait, he will speak. For a moment the fellow stood rigid, then collapsed into a chair, his face buried in his hands. I didn't mean to kill him, he cried. It was only to frighten him, to make him hand over the formula. The foreigners promised me money, more than I'd earn in 20 lifetimes. I smeared the window as they bade me, laid the prints, broke the pane. But when he refused, when he threatened me, I pulled the cord tighter than I meant. When I saw him dead, I panicked. I left the note, as they said, and fled. A heavy silence filled the room. Holmes's face remained impassive, though his eyes burned. Lestrade snapped his fingers, and the constables seized the man. So, Holmes said at last, the storm has broken, and the window's secret is ours. Yet mark me, Lestrade, this poor wretch is but a pawn. The true players are those who hid behind him, whose letters lie in that drawer. See to it they do not slip your grasp. As the prisoner was led away, Holmes turned to me with a weary sigh. It is as I told you, Watson. The miracle of the dry window was but a mask. Remove it, and we see the hand of greed and foreign intrigue. Sir Felix fell not to chance, but to design. Yet even now the greater danger lies not in this house, but in what that vial contains. He took it once more from the mantel, holding it up to the candlelight, the liquid within gleaming like quicksilver. Guard it well, Watson, for before this case is closed, we may learn why a storm was summoned to hide its secret. Holmes placed the vial carefully back upon the mantel, his expression one of grim satisfaction tinged with unease. The confession of the footman had broken the backbone of the mystery, yet I knew well enough from the set of my friend's jaw that he did not regard the affair as concluded. Lestrade, flushed with triumph at having a prisoner in hand, rubbed his palms together eagerly. There you have it, Holmes, he said. A servant seduced by money, a master slain, and the plot laid bare. Tomorrow the magistrate will have him, and the rest will be left to the law. Holmes turned upon him with a sharpness that made the inspector start. You speak as though the play has ended, Lestrade, when in truth we have only glimpsed the prologue. This fellow confessed to the strangling, yes, but mark you well. He acted under instruction, and those who set him on are still at large. The letters speak of agents, impatient and foreign. Do you imagine they will meekly depart with their pawn taken? On the contrary, they will strike again, and with greater desperation, for this vial is worth more than a man's life. Lestrade scowled but said no more, and Holmes, his gaze still fixed upon the shimmering liquid, continued in a low voice that carried the weight of certainty. This is no mere concoction of trade, Watson. See how it clings, heavy yet clear, more akin to mercury than to oil. Sir Felix died because he sought to guard its secret. Eleanor returned because she wished to destroy it. And our footman, poor wretch, thought to sell it. But for what purpose was it made? That is the shadow that yet eludes us. It was close upon 2 in the morning when Lestrade departed with his prisoner under guard, leaving Holmes and me alone in the silent house. The servants, dismissed to their quarters, moved with fearful glances, and the great rooms above seemed to groan with the memory of violence. Holmes would not leave, however. He settled himself in an armchair by the fire, his pipe sending thin spirals upward, while I sat opposite, wearied but too tense for rest. At length he spoke. You will recall, Watson, the fragment of parchment I drew from the grate. half a chemical equation, charred yet legible. Gates spoke of unstable compounds, of heat applied, and of vapor. I believe this vial contains the practical result of that experiment. If so, its potential is terrible. The Germans pressed for it. Sir Felix withheld it. He is dead. The footman played the executioner's role, but the orchestra has not finished its score. He fell silent, his eyes hooded, then abruptly rose and crossed to the writing table. From its drawer he extracted the 3 German letters and laid them flat under the lamplight. With quick, deft strokes he translated aloud, half to me, half to himself. Our agents grow restless. Payment must be secured. The formula will not remain hidden forever. And here the most telling. The demonstration shall suffice. The storm will mask its absence. Do you not see, Watson? They intended not only to seize the formula, but to test it. The storm itself was their ally. I shivered at his words, for a dreadful possibility began to dawn. Holmes, perceiving my thought, nodded grimly. Yes, the dryness of the window was no mere curiosity. It was proof. The film repelled water with an efficiency unnatural. Imagine, Watson, such a treatment applied not to glass alone, but to machinery, to armaments, to engines of war, a substance that renders surfaces impervious, that resists corrosion, that alters the very balance of power. Do you not perceive why men would kill for it? The fire had sunk to embers, and the house seemed to contract around us, listening. Suddenly, from the distant street, there came the faint rumble of wheels. Holmes started up, extinguished the lamp, and went swiftly to the window. Peering through a narrow gap in the curtain, he watched in silence. Watched a carriage, he whispered, drawn up beyond the corner. No sound of arrival from within the house, yet it waits. Our adversaries are impatient. They believe the vial still lies here unguarded. Watson, we must be ready. His words had scarcely faded when a sound broke the stillness, a faint scrape at the rear door leading to the garden. Holmes's hand shot to my arm. To your revolver, Watson. The game resumes. We moved softly through the shadowed hall, the boards creaking beneath our tread. The scrape came again, then the cautious lift of a latch. Holmes motioned me behind a tall screen, while he himself melted into the darkness of the stair. The door swung inward, and 2 figures slipped silently inside. They were cloaked, their faces obscured, but their bearing spoke of stealth and purpose. One carried a small lantern shaded with blue glass, the other a length of cord coiled at his belt. They moved with surety, as though directed to their goal, and passed at once toward the study. Holmes's voice cut the silence like steel. That will suffice, gentlemen. You tread dangerous ground. The lantern fell with a crash, its glass shattering across the tiles. The men sprang back, but I leapt from my place, revolver raised. For an instant there was a struggle of shadows. Then Holmes darted forward with the agility of a cat, seizing the arm of one intruder and wrenching him down. The other struck at me blindly, and I fired. My shot went wide, but the crack reverberated through the house. The servants cried out above, and footsteps thundered on the stairs. Lestrade's men, still posted at the gate, burst in at the commotion. One intruder, grappling fiercely, was subdued. The other fled through the open door into the garden. Holmes sprang after him, but the night swallowed both figures, and only the sound of pursuit echoed through the mist. I remained breathless, revolver still in hand beside the captive. He was no servant, no Englishman, but a swarthy fellow with a scar across his cheek and eyes that glittered with defiance. Holmes returned some minutes later, empty-handed, his face set. The other has escaped for now, but we have his companion, and that may prove enough. This house was to be their prize, this vial their jewel. Tonight we have torn away their mask. He stooped to the captured man, who glared up at him in sullen silence. Come, Watson, Holmes said quietly. The storm has not yet passed, but the wind is shifting. Tomorrow we shall see the greater shape of this conspiracy, and learn who commands these shadows from afar. The captured intruder was bound hand and foot, his cloak torn in the scuffle, revealing a seaman's coarse jersey beneath. His breathing was ragged, though his eyes, sharp and black as obsidian, held a defiance that no cord could restrain. Lestrade, summoned back by the constables who had secured the prisoner, entered with his usual mixture of irritation and self-importance. Well, Holmes, he said, planting his hands on his hips, we've got one of the rascals at least. A foreigner by the look of him, and likely the master villain. We can clap him in irons tonight and be done with the lot. Holmes, who was kneeling by the prisoner, with the quiet intensity of a physician examining a rare specimen, looked up sharply. "Do not delude yourself, Inspector. This man is but a lieutenant in the affair, not the general. His hands are skilled at breaking locks and creeping through gardens, but his mind does not pen letters in polished German. No, there is another behind him, a guiding intellect who covets the vial and commands these pawns." The man gave a sudden harsh laugh, startling us all. "You think me pawn? You will see soon enough what power lies behind me." His accent was guttural, but his English fluent. He lapsed into silence, lips pressed thin. Holmes regarded him a moment, then rose. "So be it. Silence can betray as much as speech. Lestrade, secure him at once, but not in the common jail. He must be kept from his companions, or he will vanish like mist. Let no word escape that he lives." Lestrade grumbled but obeyed, dispatching his men. When they had gone, Holmes paced the length of the study, his fingers tugging at his chin. The faint light of dawn was beginning to creep across the sky, casting the French window into pale relief. At last he spoke. "Watson, you will observe how the board has shifted. The footman's confession gave us the means. Eleanor gave us the motive, and now this intruder shows us the larger design. The formula was never for Sir Felix's gain alone. It was bait in a greater contest of nations. Our task is not merely to solve a murder, but to prevent a secret from crossing the Channel." His words left me uneasy, for I knew well the gravity he lent to matters of espionage. The vial upon the mantel gleamed faintly, and I could not but imagine unseen hands stretching across Europe to grasp it. By mid-morning, Lestrade had departed again with his prisoner. Count Holmes insisted we return to Baker Street to collect his instruments. There, in the quiet of his chemical corner, he tested a single droplet of the liquid. The reaction was immediate. Placed upon copper, it spread like a living thing, forming a sheen that resisted flame and water alike. Holmes's eyes blazed. "Watson, this substance is a revelation. It renders any surface proof against damp or heat. Consider its value to war engines, to ships, to armaments. In unscrupulous hands, it could alter the balance of Europe. Now you see why Sir Felix died, why Eleanor trembled, and why agents creep through the night. But what can we do?" I asked. "What we must always do," he replied. "Follow the chain to its master. The captured man will yield nothing readily, but his presence here confirms the truth of the letters. Somewhere in London lurks the one who directed him, one who knows of chemicals, of commerce, and of Sir Felix's affairs. We must find him before he finds us." The opportunity came sooner than expected. That evening, as the gas lamps flickered alive, a messenger arrived at Baker Street with a card. It bore no name, only an address scrawled in haste, a warehouse on the river, Limehouse. Beneath it the words, "If you would end the storm, come." I looked at Holmes in alarm. "A trap," he smiled grimly. "Undoubtedly, and therefore the surest road to the truth. We shall go, Watson, but armed and wary. Bring your revolver." We ventured forth near midnight, the fog rolling thick along the embankment. The warehouse loomed above the river like a sleeping beast, its windows dark save for one faint glow. We approached silently, the damp boards creaking underfoot. Within, through a gap in the door, we beheld a curious scene. A group of men sat around a trestle table, their features rough and foreign. But at the head of the gathering was a tall figure in a fine coat, his hair silver, his bearing unmistakably that of a gentleman. He spoke in low tones, his hand resting upon a sheaf of papers. Holmes's breath touched my ear. "There, Watson, is our general. The letters were his. The men are his instruments. He seeks the vial still. We must act quickly before they scatter." He pushed the door wide and stepped into the light. The effect was instantaneous. Chairs scraped, hands reached for knives and pistols, and curses filled the air. But Holmes's voice cut across the tumult, sharp as a whip. "Gentlemen, your storm has passed. The window betrayed you, and the game is done." Chaos followed. I fired to the rafters to startle them, while Holmes hurled himself at the silver-haired man. The others surged forward, but a whistle pierced the din, and Lestrade's men poured in from the street, having followed at Holmes's arrangement. Blows were struck, weapons clattered to the floor, and within minutes the gang was subdued. The leader struggled fiercely, but Holmes held him fast. "You are Dr. Kruger," he said coldly. "Chemist, émigré, and spy. Your letters betrayed you. Your agents failed you, and your pawns confess against you. The formula will never cross into your hands." Kruger's eyes narrowed with venom, but he spoke no word. He was dragged away with the rest, leaving Holmes standing amidst the wreckage of the skirmish, his coat torn, his face alight with fierce triumph. "Watson," he said at last, "the storm has broken indeed. Yet London will sleep tonight unaware how narrowly it escaped the tempest. Such is the fate of our work." I nodded, still breathless from the struggle. Holmes's gaze softened briefly, and he placed a hand upon my shoulder. "Come, my friend. We have faced the storm, and for the moment the window has closed. But tomorrow will bring another case, another tempest. Let us be ready." The warehouse raid had ended with a swiftness that belied the violence of its opening. The prisoners were led away under heavy guard, their curses swallowed by the fog, while the great timbers of the building echoed with the sudden silence that follows calamity. Holmes, dishevelled but unshaken, stooped to gather the sheaf of papers the silver-haired man had been clutching. His eyes flickered rapidly across the pages as he held them beneath the sputtering lantern. "These, Watson, are the final threads," he murmured. "Formulas, diagrams, calculations. Yes, Kruger sought not only the vial, but the knowledge that created it. He had labored himself, but lacked the key. Sir Felix held it. For that, he died." We returned to Baker Street in the small hours, and there Holmes spread the papers across the table, weighing them with his long fingers as though testing their truth. He examined each one with his lens, pausing often to make notations in his own neat hand. At last he leaned back, the lamplight casting gaunt shadows upon his face. "Observe, Watson," he said, sliding a page before me. "The handwriting here differs from that of the German letters we found at Queen Anne Street. It is finer, more practiced, an English hand." Kruger was not alone in his enterprise. He had a partner, perhaps within London society itself, one who moved easily in Sir Felix's world, who could correspond in his native tongue without arousing suspicion. That is why Kruger risked all to meet here tonight. I felt a chill despite the fire. "Then the danger is not ended?" "On the contrary, my dear fellow. We have but trimmed the branches. The root remains. Sir Felix's death was the result of intrigue deeper than a handful of foreign agents. Somewhere in London, a man of standing, perhaps even of influence, set this wheel in motion. We must find him before the storm gathers anew." The following morning brought Lestrade to Baker Street, looking at once triumphant and troubled. He reported that the captured men, Kruger included, had been lodged securely, but that none would speak. "They sit in their cells like stones, Holmes. Not a word, not a complaint. It's unnatural." "Not unnatural," Holmes corrected, "but disciplined. They fear their master more than they fear the law. And that tells us much of his power." Lestrade frowned. "If you're hinting that some gentleman of London is in this, well, that's a bitter pill to swallow." "It is no pill, Inspector, but a fact. Mark you, Kruger possessed means and knowledge, but not access. He required an intermediary, someone who could walk the drawing rooms, whisper to financiers, and pass letters without suspicion. That man is our quarry." For the remainder of the day, Holmes was consumed with correspondence and inquiries. He dispatched telegrams to acquaintances in the Foreign Office, examined the ledgers seized from Sir Felix's drawer, and questioned messengers who had delivered letters in Queen Anne Street. His energy seemed inexhaustible, and his eyes gleamed, with the peculiar fire that only the chase could kindle in him. By evening he had the trace he sought. Watson, the butler, mentioned strangers admitted by the garden gate. One, tall and elegant, who spoke little but carried himself with authority. He came thrice in the fortnight before Sir Felix's death. His description matches a certain gentleman of science and society, Lord Melbury, a patron of industry, with interests in shipping and chemicals. He is feted in salons as a man of progress, yet his debts are whispered to be crushing. Imagine what fortune might await him if he delivered such a discovery to a foreign power. I started. "Surely not a peer of the realm?" Holmes's smile was thin. "A title does not cleanse ambition. Remember, Watson, that treachery often cloaks itself in the finest cloth." That night we attended discreetly at Melbury's residence in Mayfair, under pretence of a call. The house was richly appointed, its drawing-room filled with books and curiosities of science. Lord Melbury himself received us, tall, silver at the temples, his manner smooth and urbane. Holmes spoke little, only his piercing gaze betraying the calculations behind it. Our host seemed untroubled, though I fancied his hand tightened imperceptibly upon his chair when Holmes mentioned Sir Felix's tragic end. When we departed, Holmes's silence was more eloquent than speech. Not until we were in the cab did he say, "He is our man, Watson." The tremor in his hand when I spoke of Hartwell, the sudden pallor when I referred to German correspondence. He betrayed himself. But proof, proof is the fortress we must yet storm. The following 2 days passed in a tense haze of surveillance. Holmes watched Melbury's house from dawn till dusk, noting the comings and goings of servants, clerks, and visitors. At last, his patience was rewarded. One evening, a messenger arrived bearing a parcel. Holmes intercepted him at the corner, and with a few sharp words and a coin, persuaded him to yield the wrapping. Within lay a letter, sealed in the same hand as the German missives found in Sir Felix's drawer. Holmes held it aloft with quiet triumph. "This, Watson, is the keystone. Melbury's hand. He is Kruger's partner, the English mask behind the foreign scheme. Tonight we shall place the final stone in our edifice." That very night, in company with Lestrade, we returned to Melbury's residence. The inspector, though reluctant to affront a nobleman, could not deny the evidence Holmes laid before him. We entered unannounced. Finding Melbury alone in his study, poring over papers, Holmes placed the intercepted letter before him. For the first time, Melbury's composure faltered. His lips tightened. His eyes flickered to the drawer at his side. Holmes's voice, cold and inexorable, filled the room. "You sought to profit by treachery, Lord Melbury. You conspired with Kruger. You drove Sir Felix to his death, and you sought to steal a discovery that could imperil nations. The game is done." Melbury rose, his face ashen yet proud. "You think you have won, Holmes, but there are others, greater men, who will not be so easily stopped." Holmes's gaze did not waver. "Perhaps. But you, my lord, will trouble no more." Lestrade stepped forward with his men, and the house of Melbury fell silent save for the rustle of paper and the heavy tread of justice. Holmes turned to me then, his eyes alight with that curious blend of triumph and melancholy that so often marked his victories. "You see, Watson, the window that refused the storm was but the opening to a tempest of greed and ambition. Now, at last, the sky clears. Yet the lesson remains. In every tempest it is not the storm without that betrays us, but the weakness within." Lord Melbury stood tall even as Lestrade's men closed in around him, his fine coat brushing against the polished desk, as though he were no more troubled by chains than by a change in the weather. Yet for all his composure, the strain about his eyes betrayed the collapse of his defences. Holmes, with the letter still resting upon the blotter between them, leaned forward, his voice quiet, but with the edge of a blade. "You may clothe your betrayal in fine words, my lord, but it remains betrayal nonetheless. Sir Felix would not yield to you, so you struck him down with another's hand. Kruger and his agents were your hounds, yet you pulled the leash. Do not think silence will shield you. The footman's confession, the German letters, and this proof of your own hand are more than sufficient." Melbury's lip curled. "You think the law will dare touch me? A peer of the realm? I shall be shielded, Holmes, by the very walls of privilege you cannot breach." Holmes's smile was thin, almost weary. "Privilege, my lord, is not a cloak against truth. The law may falter, but exposure will suffice, and exposure you shall have." At this, Melbury's bravado cracked. He lunged suddenly toward the drawer at his right. I raised my revolver, but Holmes was swifter. His long arm struck out, seizing the man's wrist before it reached the handle. With a twist he forced it back, and Lestrade's constables leapt forward to bind him. From the drawer they drew a small pistol, gleaming wickedly in the lamplight. Lestrade shook his head. "Another second and you'd have silenced yourself, my lord. Better for all, perhaps, if you had." Holmes ignored the remark, instead turning his attention to the papers scattered across the desk. Among them lay more diagrams, more correspondence, all pointing toward the same conspiracy. Shipments planned. For the continent, agents awaiting delivery, promises of fortune once the formula was secured. The noose tightened with every sheet. At last, with Melbury taken away under guard, the house fell silent save for the faint ticking of a clock. Holmes remained standing in the centre of the room, his gaze far away. I had seen him thus before, in the aftermath of great cases, when triumph was tempered by something darker. "Watson," he said softly, "this was no mere crime of greed. It was treachery woven into the fabric of our society. A man lauded as a patron of progress conspiring to arm our rivals. Think of it. The storm without was violent, yet it was the storm within these walls that truly threatened us. I could not help but shudder at the thought. And the vial, Holmes. What is to become of it? He drew it from his pocket, holding it up to the lamplight. The liquid glimmered with an unnatural sheen, clinging to the glass as though alive. For a long moment he regarded it in silence, then replaced it carefully. It shall be delivered into safe hands, Watson. Men of science whose loyalty is beyond reproach. Its properties will be studied, its dangers weighed, but never again shall it lie in the grasp of ambition, unchecked by conscience. The following day the newspapers were filled with whispers of scandal, though Holmes had been careful to keep the matter veiled. Lord Melbury's arrest was described merely as a grave inquiry into affairs of finance and secrecy. The public learned nothing of Kruger or the formula, for Holmes had pressed upon Lestrade and upon the Home Office itself that such knowledge in the wrong ears could ignite panic. To the world it was a crime discreetly resolved. To us it had been a tempest weathered at the very heart of London. That evening, back at Baker Street, I found Holmes once more stretched upon the settee, his violin resting idle beside him. The rain pattered gently against the windows, a softer echo of the storm that had heralded Sir Felix's death. I could not restrain myself from reflection. "You have saved more than a household, Holmes," I said. "You may have spared the nation itself from peril." He gave a faint, dismissive smile. "Exaggeration, my dear Watson. I but followed the thread where it led. Yet it is curious, is it not, how so simple a thing, a window that would not admit the rain, could unmask a scheme of such breadth. A miracle pane, and behind it, ambition, greed, and betrayal. Such is the tapestry of crime." I nodded, for his words carried the weight of truth. Still, I could not suppress a final question. "And Miss Eleanor?" "What of her?" Holmes's expression softened. "She is free of guilt in her uncle's death. Her silence endangered her, but her motive was not base. She wished only to destroy what had already destroyed her father. She will return to her life chastened but not condemned. Perhaps in time she will find peace." For a while we sat together in silence, the smoke from Holmes's pipe curling lazily upward, the world outside reduced to mist and rain. At length he stirred, his tone reflective rather than triumphant. "The storm has passed, Watson, and the window has at last yielded its secret. But mark my words, the greatest storms are never of wind and rain, but of the human heart. It is there in ambition and in fear that the fiercest tempests are born." I wrote these words in my journal with care, for they seemed to me the very heart of the case. And as I closed the book that night, I could still see in my mind's eye the strange image with which it had begun, a window that defied the storm, dry and unyielding, and beneath it the lifeless form of Sir Felix Hartwell. From that single riddle had sprung a chain of revelation that reached from the quiet of a London study to the machinations of nations. And thus ended the singular case of the window that refused the storm, a tale of deception and conspiracy, of false trails and hidden truths, and above all of the mind of Sherlock Holmes, who alone could draw from such fragments the full design. The morning after Melbury's arrest carried a rare clarity, the streets washed clean by the storm that had raged through the night. London seemed for once almost at peace, though I knew well enough that peace in our city was but a fragile illusion. Holmes, as usual, was already at his window, gazing out over the damp roofs of Baker Street, his expression inscrutable, his mind clearly far beyond the room in which we sat. "Holmes," I began, carefully closing my journal, "it seems the case is concluded. The guilty have been exposed, the formula secured, and Miss Eleanor spared. Is there aught more to be done?" He turned slowly, his keen eyes alight with the unmistakable gleam of reflection. "Indeed, Watson, while the immediate danger is resolved, one must always consider the subtler elements of human behavior. Lord Melbury's ambition was unchecked, his vanity a weapon as lethal as any dagger. Yet it was not brute force that brought him down, but attention to the minutiae, anomalies invisible to the careless eye. One overlooked footman, a sealed window, and a single line of correspondence. These were the threads that, when traced, revealed the entire tapestry." I nodded, for I could see, as always, the elegance of his reasoning. Each clue, each small irregularity, had been woven into a precise chain that left no room for conjecture. "And Sir Felix?" I asked quietly. "Can we truly say he is avenged?" Holmes's expression softened imperceptibly. "In a manner, yes. His death spurred the unraveling of a far-reaching plot, and justice, albeit belatedly, has been served. But one must temper satisfaction with reflection. It is not only the perpetrator who suffers, but the consequences of unchecked ambition, which ripple outward like waves across the still waters of society." The hour passed in quiet contemplation, the remnants of rain shimmering on the panes and casting prisms of light across the room. I considered the human elements entwined with the mechanical intricacies of the case: a nephew's loyalty, a niece's courage, a peer's duplicity, and the unerring logic of one extraordinary man who could discern the invisible link between them all. Holmes had, as always, been the fulcrum upon which the delicate balance of justice rested. And Miss Eleanor, I ventured once more, her future, her life beyond this shadow? Holmes rose, moving to the fireplace and resting a hand lightly upon the mantel. "She has learned the cruel weight of secrets, Watson. Her path is uncertain but unburdened. The truth has freed her, even if it has left scars. Let us hope she finds the strength to rebuild what ambition and fear sought to destroy." I could see in his eyes the faintest echo of satisfaction, an acknowledgement not of triumph, but of resolution, the quiet contentment of a case brought to its natural end. There were no grand gestures, no celebratory fanfare. Only the calm after the storm, the meticulous closure of threads once frayed and entangled. Holmes's gaze returned to the window, as though the city itself had become a puzzle to examine anew. "Watson," he said at last, "remember this. Every mystery is born of human intention, whether noble or vile. The mind that perceives, that connects the smallest detail to the larger pattern, holds the power to render chaos into order. Today we have witnessed such a transformation. Let that suffice as both lesson and warning." I sat quietly, reflecting upon the intricate path that had led us here, the cryptic footnotes of letters, the subtle inconsistencies in behavior, the hidden compartments in a seemingly ordinary household. All had converged to expose the truth, and yet, as always, I was struck by the enormity of what remained invisible in the world beyond Baker Street. At last, the room fell silent, save for the occasional crackle of the fire. Holmes, satisfied that the formalities of resolution had been observed, settled back into his chair, the faintest trace of a smile playing upon his lips. Outside, London continued its indifferent rhythm, unaware of the peril that had been so narrowly averted, and of the quiet genius that had ensured its safety. Thus concluded the case of the window that defied the storm. Justice, though tempered by circumstance, had been achieved. The guilty had been exposed, and the innocent spared. And as the rain ceased, and the clouds parted to reveal a fragile, shimmering light across the city, I understood once more the singular truth, that in the labyrinth of human motives it is observation, reason, and unyielding attention to detail that illuminate the path from mystery to revelation. Holmes leaned back, eyes half closed, content at last to let the city breathe and the story settle into history. And I, as ever, remained his chronicler, noting the final chapter of another extraordinary adventure, forever marked by the precision, insight, and brilliance of Sherlock Holmes.